My dad's words echoed in my head. "We're skipping your kid's birthday. Money's tight." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think he cared enough about my child's happiness that missing a cake, balloons, and a room full of laughter was truly out of his control. I defended him to my husband, to my friends, even to myself. After all, parents sometimes struggle, right? But something inside me twisted that night. I replayed his tone, the way he avoided my eyes, the hesitation before the excuse left his lips. It didn't feel like guilt. It felt like a performance. I brushed it off, telling myself I was paranoid until the next morning when I drove past a place I wasn't supposed to. And there, right in front of me, was the truth he never thought I'd see. I slowed my car and pulled into the far corner of the parking lot, almost as if hiding from what I was about to witness. The restaurant was one of those upscale places where a single dinner could pay for weeks of groceries. The kind of place he'd always mocked as wasting money on pretentious plates. And yet, there he was, my father, sitting at a table by the window, wearing his best blazer, laughing like a man without a care in the world. Beside him, not one but 3 people I didn't recognize, all dressed to the nines, sipping wine that cost more than my son's entire birthday setup. My chest went cold. My kid's face flashed in my mind, the little drawings he made for Grandpa, the handmade invitations he'd wanted to deliver himself. "Maybe he'll surprise me and come," my son had whispered, hope so fragile it broke my heart. I sat frozen, watching my dad order dessert, his hand waving casually for another bottle, the kind of bottle that carried 3 digits on the price tag. He had told me there wasn't money for balloons, but somehow there was money for this. That moment cracked something inside me, a kind of innocence I didn't even realize I'd been clinging to. Because it wasn't just the dinner, it was the audacity. To lie, to dismiss a child's birthday, to make me feel guilty for even wanting a small family gathering while secretly indulging himself. I drove home in silence, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. My husband asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't even form the words yet. The betrayal was too raw. Over the next few days, the pieces started falling into place. I went through old conversations, old excuses. Suddenly, patterns emerged I'd brushed aside before. Every "we can't afford it" had been followed quietly by something new for him. A gadget, a weekend trip, a golf membership. My son's birthdays, my daughter's recitals, even family holidays had been shrunk, downsized, or skipped altogether. And all along I had believed him. I had bent over backwards, making excuses to my children, teaching them empathy for a man who didn't deserve an ounce of it. By the time the next weekend rolled around, I wasn't just angry. I was awake. Awake to years of manipulation. Awake to the way he had shaped me into his defender. The way he twisted family duty into a one-way street that always ended with me carrying the weight. But I also knew one thing. If I confronted him too soon, he'd deny, deflect, and turn it back on me. He always did. This time I had to be smarter. This time, I needed proof so undeniable he couldn't wriggle out of it. So I started planning. I began with the simplest trail. Receipts. My father wasn't careful because he never thought anyone would check. But the bank app on his phone synced with a shared family email years ago, back when he wanted me to help him keep things organized. He probably forgot. I hadn't. With trembling hands, I logged in late one night, the house silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. And there it was. Not just the restaurant bill, but a string of charges that painted a picture far worse than I'd imagined. Designer store purchases, weekends at resorts out of town, memberships to clubs with monthly fees higher than my mortgage. The timestamps lined up perfectly with every excuse he'd given me. Can't help with the kids' school supplies? Swipe, 480 scholars at a golf pro shop. Can't chip in for Thanksgiving dinner? Swipe, $1,200 at a beachside resort. We're tight this month. Swipe, a tab at a whiskey lounge downtown. My stomach churned as I scrolled, my eyes burning with betrayal. The next morning, I drove to his house. I wanted to see for myself. In the garage sat a car I had never seen before. Sleek, polished, the kind of car you don't just stumble upon. He came out in gym clothes, wiping sweat from his forehead, and froze when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone sharp, not warm. It hit me then. He wasn't even afraid of getting caught. He was afraid of being inconvenienced. "I just wanted to ask you something," I said carefully, testing his reaction. "If money is so tight, how are you keeping up with everything?" He smirked. That same smirk I remembered from childhood when he'd scold me for questioning him. You wouldn't understand. Some things are just priorities. That word, priorities, sliced through me. Because what he meant was clear. His pleasures were the priority, not my kids, not family, not even honesty. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my husband, laying everything out. Receipts, photos, timelines. My husband, usually the calm one, slammed his hand against the table. "Your dad has been stealing moments from our kids," he said through clenched teeth. "And worse, he's been making you feel guilty for his lies." He was right. I had spent years internalizing blame, carrying shame for things that weren't mine. But now I had clarity. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. Because for too long, he had hidden behind the image of a struggling, noble father, the one who did his best for his family. He wasn't noble. He was selfish, and I was done keeping his secret. I didn't rush it. That was the hardest part, holding back when all I wanted was to scream at him, to rip the mask off his smug face. But years of watching him manipulate taught me patience. He thrived on twisting arguments into confusion, making me look like the hysterical daughter while he played the calm, rational parent. Not this time. I needed an audience. I needed people to see who he really was when the curtain finally dropped. And the perfect opportunity was already on the calendar. My cousin's engagement party. A family gathering, everyone dressed up, cameras out, speeches ready. He wouldn't expect it there. He'd be too busy performing his role as the doting patriarch, shaking hands and dropping lines about family first. In the days leading up to the party, I assembled my arsenal. Screenshots of every charge, photos of the car, the receipts cross-referenced with the exact days he had told me no. I even found a charge for an exclusive spa retreat on the very day he called me crying, about not being able to contribute to my son's school fundraiser. That detail alone felt like a knife twisting deeper. I printed it all out, page after page, not trusting just a phone screen that he could call doctored. My husband helped me put it into a binder, neat and undeniable. "When you open this," he said quietly, "make sure you don't let him talk over you. Read the numbers out loud. Make everyone hear it." The night of the party, I dressed in my calmest armor, a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, no flashy makeup. I didn't want drama to be mistaken for vanity. I wanted to look like what I was. A daughter who had reached her breaking point. He spotted me as soon as I walked in, his grin wide, his arms open. "There's my girl," he announced, loud enough for the room to hear, as if we were the closest of allies. I let him hug me, felt the weight of his act press against me. Inside, I was counting down. The party went on. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. He worked the room like a politician, dropping compliments, making jokes. I watched him closely, knowing the stage was almost mine. When the time came for speeches, he moved toward the microphone, ready to deliver one of his usual grand monologues about love, unity, and family. But this time, I stepped forward first. My heart pounded, my palms sweaty against the binder in my hands. "Before we celebrate," I began, my voice shaking but loud enough, "I need to share something with all of you." The room went still. My father's smile froze, confusion flashing in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Sweetheart, maybe this isn't—" he started, but I cut him off. "No, Dad, you've had the microphone long enough. Now it's my turn." I opened the binder with deliberate slowness, the sound of the pages crisp in the silence that had fallen over the room. Every eye was on me, and I could feel my father's stare boring into my side, desperate to stop me without making a scene. 2 weeks ago, I said steadily, my father told me he couldn't come to my son's birthday. He said money was too tight, that there wasn't enough for a cake, for balloons, for a single gift. I turned to the first page. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the receipt stared back at them in glossy print. A dinner bill for $947. But the very next night, I continued, my voice gaining strength. He was here. I tapped the receipt, then held up the photo I'd taken of him through the restaurant's window, laughing over wine. He shifted in his seat, trying to interject, but I raised my hand. "Not yet. Let's keep going." One by one, I laid them out. The golf pro shop purchase the week my daughter's school play went too expensive for him to attend. The luxury spa visit on the exact date he had claimed he couldn't donate to my son's fundraiser. With each page, murmurs grew louder, relatives glancing between the binder and his face, connecting dots they'd ignored for years. His composure started to crack. "This is ridiculous," he snapped finally, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I looked directly at him then, no longer speaking just to the room, but to the man who had lied to me my entire life. "Do you know what my son said the night of his birthday?" He said, "Maybe Grandpa's just tired. Maybe next year." He blamed himself, Dad. A 6-year-old boy thought your absence was his fault while you sat drinking champagne. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not here, not for him. I closed the binder with a sharp clap that echoed. You didn't just lie to me. You lied to your grandchildren. You chose yourself every single time. And I won't cover for you anymore. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the low buzz of whispers. My cousin stood from her table, eyes wide, and said softly, "Is it true?" Others nodded, faces hardening, memories resurfacing. I saw it click for them, how often he dodged obligations, always with the same tired excuse. His shoulders slumped for the first time, the confidence draining from him. "We're family," he muttered weakly, a phrase he'd weaponized my entire life. But this time, the room didn't rush to agree. Instead, they stared at him, waiting, demanding an answer he couldn't spin. And for once, I felt the power shift into my hands. He tried to stand, to take the mic back, but I stepped forward and planted myself between him and the crowd. My voice was low but sharp, cutting through the tension. "No, you're not walking away this time. You've spent years walking away while the rest of us paid for it. Tonight, you're going to listen." I could see the sweat forming on his temple, the way his jaw clenched as he realized the performance was over. "You want to talk about family?" I said, lifting the binder again. "Family doesn't mean lying to your daughter's face while you buy yourself cars and vacations. Family doesn't mean making a little boy cry on his birthday so you can sip whiskey in some club. Family means showing up. And you never did." Someone in the back muttered, "She's right." Another voice joined in. "We've all noticed it." The whispers became a chorus, and for the first time in my life, my father wasn't in control of the narrative. He wasn't the noble, struggling patriarch. He was just a selfish man caught in his own lies. His face went pale as more relatives shifted away from him, the weight of judgment heavy in the air. He slammed his glass down on the table, trying to regain authority. "This is disrespect," he barked, his voice trembling. "You don't humiliate your father in front of everyone." I met his glare with a calm I didn't know I had. "You humiliated yourself. All I did was bring the truth into the light." The mic trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. My husband stepped closer, his presence solid behind me, and I felt stronger than ever. "You told me money was tight. You made me teach my kids to accept disappointment, to believe their grandfather couldn't be there for them. But the truth is you chose not to be there. And now, everyone knows." The room was electric, the silence broken only by the sound of him sinking back into his chair, deflated, small. His eyes darted around, searching for someone to defend him. But no one moved. No one saved him. For once, the spotlight wasn't his, it was mine. And I wasn't done yet. I set the binder down on the table, opened it to the page with the largest expense I'd found, a $4,800 charge at a luxury resort. I turned the mic so my voice carried across the room. This charge was made the same week my father called me crying, telling me he couldn't even afford groceries. "Do you remember that, Dad? Do you remember how I rushed over with bags of food, how I cooked meals in your kitchen while you sat in your robe pretending to be broke? And the whole time, you were sitting on a reservation at a 5-star spa." Gasps filled the room. An aunt covered her mouth. My cousin's fiancé shook his head in disgust. I could feel my father shrinking under the weight of the stairs, every carefully crafted image of his sacrifice crumbling in seconds. He pushed back in his chair suddenly, voice raised. "So what? I worked hard for my money. I earned the right to enjoy myself." The outburst cracked, desperation spilling through his mask. I leaned into the mic. "You didn't just enjoy yourself, you lied. You manipulated. You took advantage of the people who loved you, who trusted you, who bent over backwards to excuse you. You let a little boy think he wasn't worth your time." My voice caught on that last line, but I didn't let it break me. I forced myself to hold his gaze, to let him see that his guilt had finally reached me. But not in the way he intended. My uncle spoke up then, his voice firm. "She's right. We've all covered for you at some point. Enough is enough." Others nodded, some murmuring agreement, and suddenly the room wasn't silent anymore. It was a wave turning against him, the family he had leaned on for sympathy now staring at him with unveiled contempt. He slammed his fist on the table, but the sound only made him look smaller, pettier. The man who had commanded every room with his charisma for decades now sat cornered, exposed, and powerless. I took a deep breath and steadied the mic. "You've stolen moments you can never give back, Dad. Birthdays, holidays, family milestones. You took them, traded them in for nights out and toys you didn't need. And from this moment on, you don't get to take another thing from me, from my husband, or from my children. We're done." My voice rang like steel, the kind of finality that left no room for argument. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ending. The air felt heavy as I placed the mic back on the stand, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small stack of envelopes I'd prepared. Each one contained copies of the receipts, the photos, the records of his spending. I handed them out to the relatives nearest me, letting the evidence spread like wildfire across the tables. If anyone thinks I exaggerated, here it is in black and white. See for yourself. Pages rustled, eyes widened, and one by one people shook their heads in disbelief. My father's face turned crimson, his hand trembling as he pointed at me. "This is betrayal," he hissed, voice cracking. "You've always been ungrateful, and now you want to destroy me?" I stepped closer, my tone steady, calm, and cutting. "No, Dad, you destroyed yourself. I'm just refusing to let you drag us down with you anymore." He opened his mouth to argue, but no one cared to listen. My aunt pushed her chair back and said coldly, "All those times you asked us for help, all those times you played the victim while you were living like this?" Her voice dripped with disgust. "You've been lying to us all for years." My father looked around, desperate. But the crowd that once admired him now saw through him completely. And then, the moment that sealed it. My son, who had been sitting quietly with his cousin near the back, came running up to me and tugged at my dress. His little voice echoed in the stunned silence. "Mom, does this mean Grandpa lied about not coming to my birthday?" The innocence in his question cut sharper than anything I'd said. My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. He couldn't even lie his way out in front of a child. I crouched down, kissed my son's head, and said softly but firmly, "Yes, sweetheart. He lied, but Mommy will never lie to you. And we don't need people who choose to hurt us." That was it. That was the final blow. The room was still, everyone watching a man stripped of his last shred of credibility. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, as if the truth itself had shrunk him down to nothing. He tried to stand again, muttering about leaving, but no one stopped me as I raised my voice one last time. "From today forward, you are not welcome in my home. You don't get to come around when it suits you. You don't get to disappoint my children again. You've made your choices. Now live with them." The words rang like a verdict, final and irreversible. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father stumble without anyone rushing to catch him. The air felt heavy as I placed the mic back on the stand, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small stack of envelopes I'd prepared. Each one contained copies of the receipts, the photos, the records of his spending. I handed them out to the relatives nearest me, letting the evidence spread like wildfire across the tables. If anyone thinks I exaggerated, here it is in black and white. See for yourself. Pages rustled, eyes widened, and one by one people shook their heads in disbelief. My father's face turned crimson, his hand trembling as he pointed at me. "This is betrayal," he hissed, voice cracking. "You've always been ungrateful, and now you want to destroy me?" I stepped closer, my tone steady, calm, and cutting. "No, Dad, you destroyed yourself. I'm just refusing to let you drag us down with you anymore." He opened his mouth to argue, but no one cared to listen. My aunt pushed her chair back and said coldly, "All those times you asked us for help, all those times you played the victim while you were living like this?" Her voice dripped with disgust. "You've been lying to us all for years." My father looked around, desperate. But the crowd that once admired him now saw through him completely. And then, the moment that sealed it, my son, who had been sitting quietly with his cousin near the back, came running up to me and tugged at my dress. His little voice echoed in the stunned silence. "Mom, does this mean Grandpa lied about not coming to my birthday?" The innocence in his question cut sharper than anything I'd said. My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. He couldn't even lie his way out in front of a child. I crouched down, kissed my son's head, and said softly but firmly, "Yes, sweetheart. He lied, But Mommy will never lie to you. And we don't need people who choose to hurt us. That was it. That was the final blow. The room was still, everyone watching a man stripped of his last shred of credibility. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, as if the truth itself had shrunk him down to nothing. He tried to stand again, muttering about leaving, but no one stopped me as I raised my voice one last time. From today forward, you are not welcome in my home. You don't get to come around when it suits you. You don't get to disappoint my children again. You've made your choices. Now live with them. The words rang like a verdict, final and irreversible. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father stumble without anyone rushing to catch him. He staggered toward the exit, but not before muttering, "You'll regret this. Family always comes back." His voice was weak, though, stripped of the authority he once commanded. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just stood there, my arms wrapped protectively around my son, as the sound of the door closing behind him echoed like a final curtain falling. The party was quiet at first, a strange mixture of tension and relief hanging in the air. Then my cousin's fiancé cleared his throat and said, "Well, I think we all just saw the truth tonight." A ripple of murmurs and nods followed. Some people came up to hug me, others just put a hand on my shoulder in quiet solidarity. For years, I had been the one defending him, explaining away his absences, smoothing over his lies. Tonight, I had flipped the script. Later that night, when we got home, I sat in the living room with my husband. The kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the storm they had witnessed. My husband took my hand and said, "You were incredible. You didn't just stand up to him. You broke the cycle." His words sank in, heavy but freeing. Because it wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about every time I had silenced myself to keep the peace, every time I had carried the guilt for someone else's choices. Tonight, I had finally put it down. In the days that followed, the fallout spread. My father tried calling relatives, spinning the story, but no one was buying it anymore. He showed up at my door once, pounding on it, shouting about forgiveness. I didn't answer. I didn't even look through the peephole. My husband slipped an envelope under the door. The same binder pages, a reminder that the truth was bigger than his denial. He never came back after that. Slowly, the shame he tried to dump on me dissolved, replaced with something else. Relief. Relief that I no longer owed him my silence. Relief that my children would never again wait by the window for a grandfather who had already chosen himself over them. Relief that I had finally reclaimed my voice. But the strangest thing was how quiet the world felt without his manipulations buzzing in my ear. At first, the silence felt heavy, unnatural. Then it started to feel like peace. I realized my life wasn't smaller without him. It was larger, wider, freer. And though the scars of his betrayal would always remain, they were no longer open wounds. They were just reminders, proof that I had survived. Weeks passed, and the ripples of that night spread farther than I expected. Relatives who had once praised my father's sacrifices began quietly reaching out, admitting that they too had noticed inconsistencies, but were too afraid to confront him. My aunt confessed she had lent him thousands over the years, money she'd never see again. My uncle admitted he'd covered a debt my father racked up at a casino after being told it was for medical bills. Each story was another piece of the puzzle, proving that what happened at my son's birthday wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a lifetime of deception, and each confession made me realize how much damage he had left behind. How many people had been forced to carry his burdens while he lived lavishly in secret. My husband suggested we cut ties permanently, not just emotionally, but legally. "If he ever tries to use your name for loans or credit again, we need protection," he said firmly. So I sat in a lawyer's office, signing papers I never thought I'd need. Freezing my credit, securing our accounts, making sure there was no way he could drag us into his mess. The lawyer raised an eyebrow when he saw the binder. "I've seen a lot of family disputes," he said, "but this is one of the clearest cases of manipulation I've come across. You've done the hard part. You documented everything. That's what most people can't do." Walking out of that office, I felt lighter, as if chains I hadn't noticed before were finally gone, but the hardest part was talking to my kids. My son, still hopeful despite everything, asked if Grandpa would come back for Christmas. I knelt down, looked into his little eyes, and told him the truth as gently as I could. Sometimes people choose themselves over family. It doesn't mean we're not worth love. It means they weren't capable of giving it, and we don't need people who make us feel small. My daughter, wise beyond her years, just nodded and said, "So we'll just make our own Christmas. We don't need him." Her words broke me and healed me all at once. At night, when the house was quiet, I found myself replaying the moment at the party. The way his face crumbled, the way the truth finally silenced him. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. For years, he had owned the narrative, twisting it to make me feel like the ungrateful daughter. But now the story was mine, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite it again. Still, a part of me wondered if he would try. Would he show up at another event, act as though nothing had happened, beg for sympathy when the spotlight dimmed? Or was he finally gone for good? The uncertainty lingered like a shadow at the edge of my new peace. And deep down I knew, if he ever tried to come back, I was ready. This time I wouldn't hesitate. This time I had the strength, the proof, and the will to end it again. Months rolled into seasons, and for the first time in years, I felt what it meant to breathe without someone's lies pressing on my chest. Birthdays came and went, and instead of checking my phone, dreading the inevitable "I can't make it" text, I watched my children's faces glow in the light of candles, surrounded by people who truly wanted to be there. We built our own traditions: pancake breakfasts on Saturdays, movie nights with blankets piled high, Christmas mornings filled with joy untainted by empty promises. It wasn't about replacing him. It was about proving that love doesn't come from obligation or blood alone, but from showing up again and again. And in that simple truth, we found peace. But my father didn't disappear quietly. Every few weeks, a message would come through, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, sometimes dripping with false nostalgia. "Family forgives. Don't poison my grandchildren against me. I'm still your father." I never answered. Each unread message was like a ghost at the edge of my life, but I refused to let him haunt me again. Once, I saw him across a grocery store aisle, his cart filled with expensive wine, his clothes crisp, his face lined deeper than I remembered. Our eyes met for a second, and in that instant, I saw it. The flicker of recognition that his grip on me was gone. I turned my back, walked away, and didn't feel an ounce of guilt. The real turning point, though, came in the quiet moments. Sitting on the porch with my husband, sipping coffee as the sun rose. Hearing my kids' laughter echo through the yard. Realizing I no longer needed my father's approval or his presence to feel whole. I had spent years bending myself into the shape of a daughter he could never value, only to discover that the shape I needed to be was already enough. By taking the mic that night, by speaking the truth out loud, I didn't just expose him, I reclaimed myself. Now when I look back, I don't see shame. I don't see failure. I see a woman who chose her children over a toxic cycle, who stood in front of a room full of people and said, "Enough." And though my father may never understand the weight of what he lost, I understand perfectly what I gained: freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you stop waiting for someone to change and finally change the story for yourself. And to all of you listening, I wonder, have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and protecting your own heart? What would you have done in my place?